I call Black Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a Central Bedfordshire Councillor, I refer members to my register of interests. There is much to welcome in this bill, particularly its ambition to get the nationally significant infrastructure built to support our country. And on housing, whilst I disagree with the government's allocation of targets which favour building over our countryside rather than densification of our cities, where building homes would alleviate the worst of the acute housing crisis, I do recognise the government's mandate to build 1.5 million homes and the need for ambitious planning reform. But what is the government doing to ensure that the 1.6 million homes with existing planning approved are built? I see nothing in this bill. Mid-Bedfordshire has done more than its fair share in recent years to accommodate new housing, with Central Bedfordshire and Bedford Borough growing by 16% and 18% respectively over 10 years. We are not anti-development, but some development has changed the character of our historic market towns and quiet rural villages forever. Development is increasing flooding risk, for example in Malden in my constituency, where compounded upslope development has exacerbated the impact of pluvial flooding. And development has not delivered long-promised infrastructure, like in Wixham's in my constituency, a development where shovels first went in the ground nearly 2 decades ago, but where residents have yet to see the delivery of a new GP surgery. It is because of these kinds of issues that communities have become hardened to the prospect of yet more building. And this government has a real opportunity, with thought and consideration, to create a planning system that people can have confidence in. Instead, those people have been dismissed simply as blockers. The pensioners who fear a flood every time it rains, blockers. The young parents who cannot get to their GP because one hasn't been built in their town, blockers. People with real, genuine concerns who we in this House were elected to stand up for. Madam Deputy Speaker, they're not blockers, and this bill could do much more for them.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I'll gladly give way.
On that point, my honourable friend makes an excellent point about the quote-unquote blockers. These are people who live in floodplains, who have been waiting years for a GP surgery and have never been delivered on any of the key infrastructure that they have asked for, and they cannot have property built in certain places because of a floodplain, and that is not acknowledged in this bill, and there is no provision for those residents in this bill.
Absolutely. I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. Since Bedfordshire was flooded in September, ministers will know that I've been vocal about improving resilience, and the government can do that in this bill. New houses mean nothing if residents find themselves ankle deep in water in their living rooms, as they did across the country last year. I'd like to see a strengthening of the measures on nature recovery to include explicit plans to deliver nature-based solutions to flooding. I'd like to see Schedule 3 of the Water Management Act brought into force to ensure communities have the right protections from flooding. I'd like to see this bill give more powers to internal drainage boards to take over the maintenance of infrastructure to projects to protect people from flooding. And if not, local authorities should have the enforcement powers to ensure sustainable drainage is maintained. I'd also like to see more robust measures in this bill ruling out development on floodplains, which is to my honourable friend's point. This bill could make a real difference to our flooding resilience, and I'd urge the government not to miss this opportunity. Despite protections in the NPPF, we still see development in functional floodplains. Rivers were here before us. They don't know and they don't care that we're here. As the Dutch have done successfully, we need to make room for our rivers. We must get out of their way with stronger protections against development in floodplains. Turning briefly to new towns. New towns are provided for in this legislation through development corporations, and it will be important to ensure that those corporations have the power to deliver real places and communities, not just cookie-cutter dormitory on train line that developers might like to churn out for the highest possible profit margins. New towns should capture the essence and spirit of the communities into which they are sown, and they need to be beautiful, as the Deputy Prime Minister did reflect in her opening remarks. Government should also address important questions that they're currently dodging on how these new towns will interplay with wider local development strategies. I'm disappointed not to see some of that detail ironed out in this bill. New towns will result in a double whammy of housing development for some communities, but we do not know yet exactly how damaging that might be. And the government are also yet to confirm whether the housing new towns provider will count towards a 5-year land supply. meaning our communities could be forced to take far more housing than they need without the right infrastructure unless this bill is strengthened. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government talks about being on the side of the builders and not the blockers. But without improvements to this bill, I'm afraid it's almost guaranteed to create a new generation of so-called blockers. Homes are needed so that young people who aspire to own their own home can do so. Most of the blockers, as this government likes to call them, aren't standing in the way of progress, but standing up for their communities against bad development.
Luke Murphy.